So I didn't really write this one myself. I'm not going to take credit for it. Credit goes to Earlscourt Park History.wordpress.com for a real blast from the past. I'll put the link somewhere. If you just go to this URL, you will find a sort of like self-guided tour of this park. So I decided to go and follow the self-guided tour, and I'm just going to kind of read out a few highlights from what you'll find on the website to you while showing you, I don't know, what it looked like when I went into this tour.
It's a nifty building.
So this October is the 100-year anniversary of the park, and I think that that's why there's a sort of push by some volunteers to learn a little bit more about its history. So let's jump in. We kick things off kind of bizarrely in the middle at this concession stand, which just had a brand new mural done by Muse this year in 2020. And yeah, you can see that most of what's actually been painted on this building are old archive photos from Toronto, and I think that's really fun just because I've enjoyed reading through those archives, at least the ones I can find online. There has been a concession stand somewhere in the park since it opened, but today it doesn't really operate because there are so many other, bakeries and stuff around that it doesn't really fill a need. We learn a little bit about the history of the Earlscourt community in general. It used to be just beyond the Toronto city limits, and some farmers sort of subdivided up their farm plots and sold them off to relatively poor immigrants at the time who built little shanties around. And yeah, that's sort of how this community developed and why there's still such a strong, in particular, Italian influence on it, as we'll see later. These people built, out of whatever sort of scrap materials they could find, bit by bit, and the place was affectionately known as Shack Land because of all of these shacks that were built there. So the western gateway of the park has these sort of cool inlay things, and I guess there's going to be a new entrance built and plaque commemorating the 100-year anniversary of the park, but at least for now I couldn't find it, so that's something that will change in the near future, I assume. What is today this stretch of Caledonia Park Road? It used to be called Station Road. This is because Ontario's first rail company operated a rail line here. You can see this mural actually celebrates that. And yeah, today it's sort of a route along a GO train. I saw a few whiz by, but couldn't really catch any because I wasn't quick enough. And there's no train station here though. Between that train station and the streetcar routes, which are still there, this was a popular place for groups of people to gather for big picnics or rallies or various celebrations. Following the Second World War, there was a big housing crisis in the area, and a bunch of temporary emergency housing was built. And eventually this was turned into the sort of pretty distinctive public housing that we can still see along this road. So we head back into the park and can find the Giovanni Cabato public skating rink. People have been skating in this park for over 100 years now, actually, and kind of nifty. There used to be a skate factory, a CCM factory, not far from here as well. So you could go and buy a new pair of skates and come slide around, and been able to do that for quite a while now. There's also this pool and tennis courts added here. I'm on the shoulder season though, so there's neither skating or swimming happening here while I'm filming, but they look like they're pretty frequented places just based on, where they are and how many people are around, even on such a kind of cold day. The neighborhood to the east of the park is called the Corso Italia. There's a huge Italian diaspora here. You can still hear, especially old men speaking Italian very energetically on the streets here, so that's kind of fun. And that's why everything at the park is sort of named after Italian Canadians. So before all of the Italian immigration, which really followed the Second World War, there was a huge recent British immigrant, especially a working class population who lived here, which meant that when World War I broke out, this was an unusually patriotic to the royalty location, and enlistment rates were really high here, the highest in Canada actually, and that also unfortunately meant that some of the highest casualty rates for Canadians came out of this community. With so many men overseas, this left the women to run the whole place. It was particularly difficult being a working class community during the pandemic that happened 100 years ago. And this also meant that a lot of them turned into very competent organizers and activists as well that championed a lot of women's rights at the time. So in the 1920s, when they were making this park, there was a bit of a debate around the name itself. Some people thought that Earlscourt might, alienate some of the neighboring communities that aren't named Earlscourt. And they suggested mostly royalty-themed things, it looks like, sort of Royce Park itself, or Prince of Wales Park, or Prince Edward Park. But eventually they went with the Earlscourt name to honor, basically, the huge number of people from that community who sacrificed themselves during World War I. In 1972, funding was approved to build this community center. It's named after Joseph J. Piccinini, I don't know. Apparently everybody just calls it JJP, so I'm going to go with that as well. JJP was a big soccer entrepreneur, among other things, and recently the former cricket courts, which sort of had fallen out of popularity, became soccer fields that were even being used while I was there, kind of early on a nasty day. So I think that these must still be popular parts of that community. So in between being a cricket pitch and a soccer field, it was also a big baseball stadium here during the 50s, I guess, and used to draw pretty big crowds, but today there's just sort of a normal diamond tucked in behind the community center. There's a long history of playing soccer here. There used to be a lot of industrial league, sort of inter-company competitions happening, which apparently used to get quite rowdy, so that must have been quite the time. So to cut down on some of these fights, bleachers were installed. I'm not entirely sure how bleachers stop fights, but to their credit, I didn't see any fights while I was there, so I guess they're doing a good job. The next stop on the tour is the wading pool. I think that this disc in the ground is the wading pool with sort of a maze on it. I'm not actually sure if it is or not, though. So in order to prevent unholy acts like children playing on the park in Sundays, it was usually locked up. But on particularly hot heat wave days, this wading pool would be open to people, which eventually led to parks being open on Sundays. The shelter near the pool was built in 1924, and just because it's my thing, I managed to capture the exact same angle as this photo, so I'm happy about that. I'm also surprised how little it's changed. The little knobs underneath the windows are even still there. As part of the park centennial, they're going to make these washrooms accessible too, which is something that probably should have happened sooner, but I'm happy they're getting around to. Next stop, the running track. There was a lot of people running on it for such a cold and miserable day. So I assume this must be quite popular, actually. I didn't take a lot of time to film people just because it felt creepy, but yeah, this is the running track. Tons of track meets and cross-country running and preps for marathons all take place or end along this running track, and yeah, I'm not going to go into each individual one, but it was pretty nifty to read about them. The next stop, again, I'm not really confident I actually captured. It's the site of the Cooper Royce estate, which I guess is supposed to be somewhere around where this parking lot is. I'm wondering if I'm just not able to find it because I'm not sure what I'm looking for. This was once the site of the Preston Villa, a big impressive home of the people who also constructed the railway and the railway station and such in this area. There's a lot of cool tie-ins with local politics and Rolls-Royce and a few other prominent families in the area, but check those out. I can't really make it more concise than it already is. Again, heading back into the park, we go past a dog off-leash area, and then you can see this sort of big cliff that falls off. This used to be the edge of an ancient lake, Lake Iroquois, that used to be here in the area, which means that basically everything beyond it was flooded at some point. Maybe will be again soon. These glacial lakes helped create some very favorable landscape that was used both by the natives and sort of newer people, and a lot of the clay was used to build buildings in this area as well. The Royce family could also view the high voltage power lines. I see there are still some running overhead adjacent to the park, so I wonder if these are still running along the same route, which was where some of the original hydropower from Niagara Falls was coming into the city and lighting up their big, beautiful home. And actually, 100 years from now, the area under these might be part of the Green Lane Plan, which says that the city's going to try to build parks out of basically all of the currently kind of unmaintained area that exists underneath existing hydro pylons. So I'm looking forward to doing an update for that once that's completed. So I really glossed over a lot of the details that are actually on the website, so I recommend that if you want to learn more about some of the things I showed you in this video, that you go and check out that website, or especially if you're in the area, go and do the tour with the webpage open. It was a lot of fun to sort of have little history tidbits as you're wandering around the park. And yeah, have a beautiful day.